The Wright Brothers, created by Key and Schaefer. Wilbur and Orville Wright, also known as the Wright Brothers, are considered to be the fathers of aviation, based on the fact that they achieved the first powered, sustained, and controlled airplane flight. Wilbur Wright was born on April 16, 1867, near Millville, Indiana, into a family of 5, he being the middle child. Orville Wright came along just 4 years later in the August of 1871. The brothers' father, Milton Wright, was a bishop in the Church of the United Brethren in Christ. With their father on the road for long periods of time, the Wright brothers often preoccupied themselves with every child's prized possession, toys. One toy that their father brought them drew the boys close together. It was a small model helicopter made of cork, bamboo, and paper, and powered by a rubber band to twirl its blades. Because of this toy, Wilbur and Orville would develop a lifelong love of aeronautics and flying. As time passed, Wilbur became more and more involved in school. He worked hard and studied hard. He made plans to attend Yale University after high school. However, an accident changed the course of Wilbur's life during the 1985 and 86 winter. He was badly injured on an ice hockey game when another player's stick hit him in the face. Because of this accident, Wilbur went into a deep depression and dropped out of high school. He also gave up plans on college. His whole life was affected by this one event. Because of these injuries occurrence, he spent most of his time at a family's home, either in the library reading books or taking care of his mother, who had tuberculosis at the time. She ended up passing away in 1889. While not necessarily well-schooled, the brothers were well educated. In 1889, the brothers started their own newspaper called the West Side News. Wilbur edited the paper, while Orville was the publisher. The brothers then opened a bicycle sales and repair shop called the Wright Cycle Exchange at 1005 West 3rd Street in Dayton, Ohio, in 1892. They carried many brands of bicycles, including Fleetwing, Reading, Coventry Cross, Envoy, Smalley, Warwick, Duchess, and Halliday Temple. They even began to build and design their own bicycles by 1896. They were manufacturing their own bicycles called Wright Flyers. I guess you could call it the right choice. The Wright brothers felt that something was missing, though. They were always working on different mechanical projects and keeping up with the scientific research. They then realized that they wanted to experiment with flight. The Wright brothers followed the research of German aviator Otto Lilienthal. When Lilienthal died on a glider crash, the brothers decided to start their own experiments with flight. Wilbur and Orville set to work trying to figure out how to design wings of flight. They would mainly study birds and their wings to study how they flew and stayed in the air. Their experiments led them to create a biplane that could be manned by warping the wings. Wing warping enables the pilot to control the plane by creating more or less lift on the wings on either side of the plane. The Wright brothers used their knowledge to also create a propeller driven by a gasoline-powered engine, which they also had to build themselves. Starting in 1900, they conducted numerous tests in the sand dunes at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Kitty Hawk is greatly known for its strong winds. On December 14, 1903, the Wright brothers were ready to test the aircraft that they had built. The experiment failed and the plane sustained minor damage. After repairing the aircraft, they tried again on December 17th. This time, the plane stayed in the air for 12 seconds and covered 120 feet The brothers tested their aircraft 3 more times that day with increasing levels of success. The final flight of the day carried Wilbur 852 feet and 59 seconds. Many in the press, as well as fellow flight experts, were reluctant to believe the brothers' claims at all. Only 5 Ohio newspapers covered the story. The others refused to believe that flight was possible. The brothers continued to experiment with their aircraft in Huffman Field near Dayton. In 1906, the Wrights received a patent for their invention, providing them the security they needed to pursue funding more openly. In 1908, Wilbur set out for Europe, where he had hoped he would have more success in convincing the public and selling airplanes. He found himself in France, where he had much more success. He made many public flights and gave rides to officials, journalists, and statesmen. With the huge success of the Wright brothers, they became huge celebrities in Europe, as they were hosted by royals and heads of state and were frequently featured in the press. The Wrights began to sell their airplanes in Europe before returning to the United States in 1909. The brothers became wealthy businessmen, filling contracts for airplanes in Europe and the United States. By 1909, they organized the Wright Company, with Wilbur serving as their president and Orville as vice president. The company manufactured airplanes in Dayton and operated a flight school at Huffman Field. Wilbur fell ill on a trip to Boston in April 1912. He was diagnosed with typhoid fever and died on May 30th, 1912, at his family home in Dayton, Ohio. Orville assumed his brother's position as president of the company, but he had little taste for executive life. He sold the company in 1915 and retired from the aircraft business. For the next 30 years, Orville served as an advisor on numerous aviation boards and organizations, including the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the predecessor to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. Wright wrote in his diary for the last time, saying, "A short life full of consequences, an unfailing intellect, imperturbable temper, great self-reliance, and as great modesty, seeing the right clearly, pursuing it steadily, he lived and died." In January 1948, at the age of 76, Orville Wright suffered a heart attack and died in Dayton.